that if I move, then the me behind me moves. All right, you ready? I find it quite funny. So let's see. Come back, and then they all come back. Go this way. And I'll come back. It's kind of like one of those sort of, you know. Yeah. A boy band. Yeah. Hey, I could do my own boy band. That'd be fantastic. Right now. So where was I? I was doing the site, which is that one. Not that one. Let's do that one. Try this one. Yes, business economics. I haven't changed the title of it. Now, key terminology is there. Go through. Now, there is a little bit in there and words that we're going to become familiar with. There's a little bit of maths involved with some of the terminologies there, but don't panic. It's not too bad a maths. The assessment objectives, they're there as per normal. I put the slides in, I think. Now, because of the net speed, that might take a little while, and depending where you are, it might take a little while at home as well, but they're all there, and extras and worksheets and all sorts of other things. In the past paper bit, I put a couple of practice questions so that you could see the sorts of language that is used. And obviously we don't know the theory yet, but you can sort of see where they're wanting us to go with regards to what they're going to be asking you. So multiple choice, and then the extended response. I've got the two different skills here. I've got the definition skill and extended response, and then the discuss skill, where the discuss skill is all about this whether or not sort of scenario. So you're going to have two arguments kind of together. You're going to have an argument and a counter argument, right? That's the past papers. I've put the sites in as per normal. Familiar with those. That's the Tutor to You. It's a very good site. You do have to be careful because they don't just do economics. They do a whole bunch of other things. And they're obviously also A-level mostly. So please be aware of that, that some of the content there is actually A-level based. elearneconomics.com is amazing, and we're going to try and get you full membership of that. And then of course some YouTube revision, which is available to you. All right, and I've just thrown a few in there at this point, just some terminologies, etc., that will be useful that you can review. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the site you have access to. Oops, I don't need to do that. I need to do. I wasn't presenting my screen there. Okay, that's all right. Did you see any of that? Hopefully you did. You did. So I'm turning AirPlay off. Now we're back to normal. Now we're going to go over here. We're going to jump into Nearpod. All right, so the Nearpod code is also in Classroom. Now, one of the things that we did last time was, well, you did last time, was you are preparing your business case studies, right? And examples of businesses that you are familiar with or you are interested in, and you've found information about those businesses and you've collected all of that, and that's brilliant and good, and hold on to that. Because as we go through the topic, you're going to be able to add more to those case studies that you've got. Right, now the code for the Nearpod for today, 7R256, 7R256. Hopefully that's the same code that ended up in the classroom. So if you can jump in there, that would be brilliant. All right, I see you're getting in there now, which is good. Let's see who we have. All right. Oh, good. Getting in there. Fantastic. That's an interesting name you've got, Darwish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that your Thursday name?
Yes, it is. It is my Thursday name. Yep.
Okay. Good. Right, fantastic. Now, so we're going to be jumping through here. There's going to be some activities, obviously, for you to do as well. Charles? Yes, are you there, Charles?
Yeah, yes, I'm here.
Okay. Janelli, you're here.
Mr. David, I'm here. Sorry, my microphone's a little bit.
Okay, no problem. Are you in the Nearpod as well?
Yeah, I'm going to join now.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, so have your business case study, right? That's good, fantastic. Make sure that as we go through, you're going to be able to add to that. And we are going to be discussing other businesses too, not just your one, other ones, right? So keep that in mind. But first, we need to think about factors of production. Now, if you're able to scroll your way back in your mind or through your notes, all the way back to nearly at the start of the course, one of the very first, or some of the very first topics that we discussed in our introduction to economics were factors of production. Thinking about the 4 general categories of resources that we're going to use in production. It's going to be quite important for a business because a business needs to be able to select different factors of production. A business needs to be able to convert them all into a good or service that it's hoping to sell. So the understanding of what the factors of production are is important, but also how a business might use them and the decisions that they make with regards to them. So that's what we look at first. So the idea of those factors of production. So, because you know this already, what are the factors of production? Give examples. You've got about 30 odd seconds. Away you go. So you're going to write what the 4 factors of production are with some examples that you can come up with. As you've possibly, right, no panic, it's just my water bottle. You may have seen an email, or mum and dad may have seen an email to say that it is the likeliest that we will all be back in school next week. Fantastic. Does mean you're not going to get your sleep in the mornings. Okay, but all back in school next week. Woohoo! Which will be really good. Good to see you all. You'll be back in the physical space, etc. That'll be really good. Good. Well done, Tracy. Very good. About the rest of you. And ye? Yes? Yes, you're right. You didn't need the question mark there, and ye. You're right. You didn't add any examples, though. Right? Remember to make sure that when you're given questions, even questions like these, that you actually fully work out what you're needing to do for those questions. So what are the factors of production? With examples. Now, in economics, quite often we ask for examples. It might be define something and give an example, or it might be that we're expecting you in an analysis case to use a real life example. Right? So say the business case study that you're building now, you're then going to be able to use that as an example when you're answering questions about, well, businesses. Yes, Gianelli, well done. Land, labour, capital, entrepreneurship, that's absolutely right. Those are the categories for the factors of production, but what goes into those categories? What examples could we come up with? About another 10 seconds left, and then we'll move on. Okay. You might have got one wrong there, Charles. Andy, you going to have a go? Here we go. Let's see. Oh, very close. Well done. Right, let's have a look. See, I like what Dale has done. He's very short, sharp, clear to the point. Land, the natural resources, the ones we find in the environment, the actual physical land itself, the animals, the minerals, the air, the wind, the water, all of those things, we put them into a category, and the category that we have is land. Labour is us. It's the human resources, the people who do the building of the machines, right? Completing the tasks, making the goods and services. Capital, they're the machines that we use in the production process. So it might be, as said, a factory. That's a very physical, obvious capital good. But the computer that you're using is also a capital good. The pen that you use to write down your notes, also capital good. So there can be other things that you don't always think of. The overhead projectors, the fans, right, the air conditioning units, all of those sorts of things are actually capital goods. And lastly, the enterprise, that's the risk-taking managers. Those are the people who bundle everything up, all of those resources up, and turn them into some sort of good or service. They can come up with new ideas. That would be a really good thing to do, that innovation part of that. And people do this all the time, and you've seen new ideas coming out. And this is the age of innovation, what some might suggest, when we see all of these weird, cool, and amazing technologies, you know? I mean, the next thing is supposed to be the AR and the VR and the like, so that would be pretty cool if that was to happen, all right? And there are lots of different things that might be able to be possible when you do that. One of the things for me is I would really like there to be, you know, the sort of the VR or AR maybe, the models that we do, so supply and demand, but have them actually, you can see them kind of in real life. They're kind of popped out there in space, and then they shift, and then you see all of the shifts and movements actually in real space. That would be kind of cool. So maybe something like that. If you guys are good with that sort of thing, maybe you create it. Now, because the entrepreneurs, the enterprise, the risk-taking, that's the same word, the risk-taking managers are going to have to bundle all of these resources together. They've got to make decisions. They've got to decide which factors of production to use. They've got to decide how much of them to use, the quantities to use. So they need to decide on the types of factors of production, okay? Part of that is based on what they're actually going to be making, yeah? You can, in theory, make a wooden bicycle, but the old joke says that, what do you know about a wooden bicycle? Well, it wouldn't go. No. All right. So then we've got to think about, so what type of good is it? Because that will then dictate what types of factors of production we can use. then the productivity of those factors. Now, productivity is a word you may not have come across before, right? It might be. It's the idea of how good you are at doing what it is you need to do, the task that you've been set, yeah? So if you're thinking about the productivity of a worker who is working in a McDonald's, how many hamburgers per hour can they make? That's a productivity measure, right? You've got an hour. How many hamburgers? Go, yeah. It might be how many baskets made for a basketball player, okay, during the course of the game, and you see those statistics, those productivity statistics, okay. So at the moment, those of you who are familiar with the team called the Golden State Warriors in the NBA, you might be familiar with Steph Curry, who is currently shooting amazingly well, right? So much so that it's almost inhuman. He's actually hitting, I think, if I'm not incorrect, 92% from the free throw line, which is above the normal level that you would expect. So his productivity level is beyond normal. You know? Productivity of the factors and how much they cost. So it might be that there's this amazing resource, you must have it, it's going to be so good for your business, but it's too expensive. Yeah. And then we talked about this one. You remember this? This was going back years. I won't say years, going back months now to the start of the course again, where we talked about this idea of intensity, right? Where we suggested that dependent on the amount of the resource that we had, so if we had relatively more labor than we had capital goods, then we would consider ourselves to be labor intensive. If we had relatively more capital goods than we had labor, then we would consider ourselves to be capital intensive. So intensity is about the proportion or the percentage of labor or capital that we have in relation to the other resources that we use, all right? So businesses have to make that call. They have to decide what the resources are. They have to decide things based on what goods they're making, the cost of those resources, but they also have to think about the percentages that they're needing of those resources. So it may be, well, this is a very labor-intensive job, so we need to hire more labor. I mean, yeah, I know we're moving into a time where a lot of what was labor-intensive now becomes more capital-intensive. So we've now got robots in the warehouses moving everything around. We've got robots in all sorts of different building sites doing different things. If you haven't looked at Boston Dynamics lately, right, online, there's lots of YouTube clips about Boston Dynamics and their robots. There's a robot that they built that could actually build walls, right, like a builder. Okay. There's the Spot the Dog robot that can go and find things. There's a robot snake that they've developed that's supposed to be able to go inside things that other people can't go. So say there's been an earthquake and there are people trapped in the rubble, they can send the robot snake in to find them. Okay, that's sort of an idea. So yes, we are reaching a point where more and more what used to be labor intensive production processes can actually become capital intensive. Right. What businesses are more labor intensive? Well, they do tend to be things that you can't use capital goods for, potentially. Although, as said, maybe we're inventing more ways to do that. I mean, drone delivery systems, that's amazing. You can send a drone flying over and it drops your parcel down. Yeah? That'll be quite exciting, I would think. Now, next thing for you to do, task number 1, is close the gaps. Right, so have a go. Fit all the words into the different sentences from the notes that you've just worked through. There you go. Got about 30 seconds. right. How are we getting on? Yeah, for about another 10 seconds to put them all in the little slots. Right. Now, that's where we were. Okay. So businesses decide on the types of factors of production. So FOP, factors of production, just a short version. Factors of production based on the type of a good or service to be made, the productivity of those factors, the costs of those factors of production. Intensity refers to the proportion or percentage of one factor that a business employs in comparison to another, i.e. in car production, a business typically employs more capital goods in proportion to the other resources, so we would then explain that it is more capital intensive. All right. So what we are suggesting here is that those resources that we're using, these factors of production, they're going to be substitutes for each other, okay? So it's possible, maybe in some cases, that we can use labor instead of capital, or capital instead of labor. It's not going to be true in every case, but it is possible. So if it is possible, then a rise or a change in the productivity level of one resource might lead you to make a decision to change to that resource. All of a sudden, machinery becomes more productive. Hey, let's go and get more machines. All of a sudden, labor is more productive for that particular task. Let's move more labor. Yeah? Or it could be that perhaps the costs have changed. Yeah? In which case, it's now cheaper to employ more labor or more capital goods. So even though you had made an initial decision, because they're substitutable, these resources, it's entirely possible that over time you might substitute some of those resources for other resources based on, again, changes in productivity or changes in the costs. All right? Now, if you think about the businesses that you've got in your case study, again, what do they use? How intensive is their production process? Would you classify them as labor intensive, or would you classify them as capital intensive? Okay. Now, if they're capital intensive, have they changed from being labor intensive in the past, or have they always been capital intensive? Is there a time that you think that they might change? So if they're labor intensive, can you see that there might be a time in the future when maybe, because of productivity or costs, they might change to being more capital intensive? So thinking about that is a good way to add in the application of the concepts. Now, here is task number 2. If resources like capital and labor are substitutes for each other, what happens if the cost of labor was to rise? So labor is now more expensive. What do you expect to happen with regards to the decisions the business is making about whether to employ capital or labor? Go. Here we go. Well done. Good work, Yasin. Very good answers. I like the way you're expressing your answers, team. It's very good to see. Just waiting on a couple more to finish off. It's an interesting idea, Hang Yi. It's an interesting idea. Could be right there. It could happen. But we want to make sure, again, that we're answering the question set. So yes, you are right that there is, because there's now more demand for capital, it could actually push the price of capital up. But the idea here is that because the cost of labour has risen, then because they're substitutable, right, you're going to substitute away from labour and to capital. Okay.
Oh, I get it now. Yeah.
Now, if I look through, I really like the way that Tracy has expressed it. Okay, Tracy has said if the cost of labour was to rise, the business is likely to substitute capital for labour because the cost of it is lower. Good. That's a good way to explain it. Yeah. And in the exam, remember that it's about applying your knowledge, but linking it to what the examiner is asking you to do. And Yasin, likewise. A lot of businesses would most likely shift to capital-intensive production processes as they keep expenses to a minimum, all right, that idea, okay? So again, you're thinking about the cost of labour being more expensive, so businesses are now becoming more capital-intensive. Excellent. Now, we're going to change our factors of production, but sometimes, as I hinted at before, it's not quite so easy to do that. The very nature of some goods and services suggests that it is easier to produce them with some resources than others. So it may be that they're not perfectly substitutable, right? We might make an assumption that they're going to be capital intensive, but maybe they can't. Maybe they can't substitute to that. Right? So they might be able to change, but maybe they can only change in the longer term. Right? So take a time approach. So say, for example, you want to build a factory. Right? Well, how long does it take you to build a factory? Okay, a while. You can't just go, there's a factory. Yeah. So therefore, you want to become more capital intensive by creating this factory, but you can't create the factory overnight, so it's going to take a bit of time. Okay, so you're moving towards that. Yeah, so this idea here is that in the short term, you can change some factors of production. Maybe your labor. Maybe you can move your labor around. You're doing that task. Well, now we're going to move you to do this task, right? Or we need to move more people to that task. Oh, we've got so much demand for this product. Oh, we're going to need to build a new factory. We can't do it right now, but we're moving people around to try and cope 5 months, 6 months down the track. There's your factory, increased demand. Yeah. So factory size is only able to be changed, for example, in the longer run, because it's a big piece of capital equipment. So things that are complicated capital-wise, capital machinery-wise, yeah, they're going to take a while. Right? It might be just pop down to the shop to buy some more pens so you can do more work. Yeah, but to actually build a complicated machine or a factory, it's going to take a little bit of time. Might be easier to change labour. Okay? But you do also have to take labour contracts into account, because as we talked about before, when you are getting a job, we talked about different types of jobs and different incomes that they're able to earn, etc. Well, you're employed. You've got a contract. You know? So if you're going to say to your workers, okay, we need you over here to do this job now, Well, that's a whole new contract. Yeah. Yeah. Right. You were there. Now you're there. It's a new job. Right. Different job description. Okay. I used to have this quite a lot in New Zealand because we would have athletes in our sports team. Sorry, another sports story. Apologies. And they would get locked into that idea that this is who I am in my team. So we would have guards who would never defend because they're a guard. They can't box people out. They're a guard. Okay. We would have centres and even forwards sometimes who wouldn't try to dribble or carry the ball down the court because that's not their job. Yeah. And you just couldn't do that. You just had to stop that. We had some very successful centres who were able to dribble the ball down the court. In fact, a couple of our centres were actually able to dribble the ball down the court, sometimes faster or better than some of our guards, which was quite interesting. Bit of an interesting scenario. Right. By the way, just that triggered a thought in the news over the other day. One of our ex-students who was in our basketball program in New Zealand has now been selected to the New Zealand basketball team. The Tall Blacks is what they're called, and they're going to be playing in Australia very soon, I think. So this wasn't one that I personally coached because I was in the upper teams and he was in the younger teams at that time, but he's now come through and he's done very, very well for himself. All right. Why do you think it is difficult for some businesses to change their factors of production? Remember, we're thinking costs have changed, let's change our factors of production. Why is it more difficult than the theory suggests? Here we go. Now it's coming in. Yes, well done. It's exactly the right idea. Very good. Give you a little bit more to have a go. This again is an application question, so it's not asking you to define anything. It's not asking you to identify anything. It's just saying, we know you know this theory. We're wanting you to apply it in a real life situation. And it's also got a little bit of an element of critical thinking about it. So you're, at the same time, you're critiquing the theory. You are suggesting that theory says one thing, instant change. Reality says, no, it's not quite that straightforward. That's an interesting thought, Yasin. That is. There's, you know, about the machine learning and AI, chatbots. You know, you go online sometimes and you're wanting to find information out and you've gone to a company website and you think you're talking to a real person, but it's actually a bot doing it. And there has been conversations that in the future, exams could potentially actually be marked by AI. You don't have to be a person because it's machine learning. It's once you give a certain framework to a machine and you teach it a pattern, it will then automatically look for those patterns. So it's possible, you know, relatively speaking, to teach a machine to mark IGCSE economics, for example. So it might take the people out of the equation in that case. Yes, well done, Tracy. Right. Now, that is a higher level skill than what you're normally used to, the idea that you're critically thinking about the theory in this application. So don't panic, right? But this is where we are moving you towards, the skill level. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, again. Very good, Tracy. I like Tracy's answer, so I'm going to share it with you all. I think I'm sharing it with you. Yes. All right, so you should see Tracy's answer pop up on your screen. Right? It says, because there might be contract problems. For example, firms wanting to change capital to labour, but there are labour contracts, or the time needed to change, i.e. labour to capital, but the time needed to build factories would be too long. So good. So you are critically evaluating the theory. You're saying, this is what the theory says. You're able to change your production process from labour to capital with regards to intensity. But in the real world where we live, we know that that is not quite the way it actually works. Okay, there are contracts for labour. There is time needed to build and make machines. I mean, you might even need to apply for official permission for your factory, and that might take months in and of itself. Right, well done. Good work, team, rock stars. Aha! Now we're going to introduce you again to that idea about productivity. You are part of the labour of this particular exercise. So we're going to see your productivity levels. Now, ordinarily, when I would do this, we'd do it in class and we'd have activities, people running around doing different things. But obviously, social distancing and our virtual learning wise, okay, we can't do it that way. So instead, here's what we're going to do, right? What's going to happen is the challenge is going to pop up on the screen. And it's going to ask you to do some work in your screen, and you're going to be time limited to do that work, okay? So you need to do the work as fast as you can in that time period, right? And then at the end of the time, okay, we're going to see who has completed the most tasks in that time period. And we might do a little bit of quality control to see, oh, this one's better than that one. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, it'll be interesting because I've done this exercise with the other cohort, so I'll be interested to see if you guys are more productive than your peers in the other class. That'll be an interesting one to see. All right, so here's how this works. Okay, it is a drawing challenge. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is it says, and you may not be able to read it, but it says how many stick figures can you draw in 15 seconds? Right? Yeah, I was right. So you've got to draw the stick figure. Oh, I think it's easy, but you've got to do as many of them as you can on the screen in 15 seconds. Okay? Now, when I push the green button, it's going to give you a countdown. It's going to go 3, 2, 1, and then it'll be to go. Yeah, I know.
Wait, I don't get it. Wait, what do we have to draw?
You're going to be drawing stick figures, little people, little sticks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not an artist, so I do stick figures when I draw people. Yeah, easier way to do it. Okay, do we understand what will happen? Any questions? I'm going to push green. It'll go. It'll give you a countdown. It'll go 3, 2, 1, and then you'll be drawing as fast as you can to get as many stick figures as you can in the 15 seconds. I picked 15 seconds because it gives you that extra stress. All right, here we go. Green button's going to be pushed. He says, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Drawing. 15 seconds on the clock. Oh, we're down to 13 already. Come on. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. All drawings in. Oh, let's see how many we got. Oh, goodness me, Andy, that's a few stick figures. Look at that. Right, and yeah, I like your stick figures. They You even put clothes on some of your stick figures by the look of it. Got 5 over there. Wenching, you managed 3. Tracy's got 5. You've got 5, 5, 4. Oh, we've got a little wee circle here, Nelly, a circle of people. 5 seems to be the number to beat. Lynn, your stick figures keep growing. Maybe that was part of the problem. All the same size. Andy, look at that. How did you manage that? I will say, though, Andy, that I think that you ended up with a few that would possibly fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe's mutants. Some of your stick figures there do. Some of the heads aren't even on the bodies, and some of them look like they might have fallen over and been run over by a truck. Yeah. Oh, is that the Mandarin symbol? Is that Mandarin symbol for person? Maybe. Ah, okay. All right. Well done, team. So that's about productivity. Now, I think, yes, I need to do this next bit. All right. Now, these are the factors or the determinants, if you will, the things that determine your demand for capital goods. And we've mentioned a couple of them already. So we're going to go through them, right? The price of the capital goods. If capital goods are more expensive, you're not going to be able to afford them. If all of a sudden their prices decreased, you're more likely to be able to invest, to afford to buy the capital goods. The price of other factors of production, so labor. So you're looking at the comparative prices between capital goods and labor. The profit levels of your business. If your business is making a lot of profit, then they're potentially going to have an amount of money that they can use to invest in capital goods. Corporation tax, right? Tax that the government puts onto a business. By the way, the word corporation is kind of a fancy word for business, right? So if the government puts a tax on your business, they're charging you a certain amount of money, you have to pay that money to the government, right? Therefore, you have less money as a business. You may not then be able to invest in capital goods. Revenues, that's how much you're able to earn from sales. So again, it gives you a pool of money that you could potentially use to invest in capital goods. Interest rates. Now, interest rates is an interesting one, and we don't often think about this, but in order for people to build big machines, big capital goods like factories, they might need to borrow the money from a bank, okay? In which case, they're going to need to pay that money back to the bank with interest. So if interest rates are rising, it's going to make the loan more expensive, which means perhaps they choose not to invest. Next one, confidence levels. Now, I know you guys are all rock stars with regards to your confidence, right? But it might be that a business isn't confident about the future, okay? Oh, we're a little bit worried, we're a little bit nervous, so we don't want to invest all of this money in a new machine because we're not sure what's going to happen next week. Yeah. Or consumers, they might not be confident equally and therefore perhaps not buy the goods and services that they thought they might buy. And technology is a big one. We know this, we deal with technology every day, right? You guys sitting there staring at the thing, yeah? My son is addicted to his iPad. He has to take it with him and do work with it all the time, right? So I put it down, have a breather, go and play. No, I need my iPad with me when I play. No, you don't. You really don't, yeah? But if the technology is improving, that means capital goods that weren't possible before, or things that weren't possible before with regards to machines and what they could do, now might be possible. Yeah. So drone delivery systems, I never would have thought that would be possible. It's just, right, mind-blowing. But that is going to be one of the new things, okay? And the whole robots and assembly lines and robots in factories and all of those sorts of ideas, that's new, yeah? The one that we've seen, because we've watched the news a bit, okay, not often because it gets quite sad at times, but we've watched the news and we've seen that in some hospitals they're using robots to go down the wards to check on the patients. Is it South Korea that they're doing that? Does anybody know? No? I think it was South Korea, and it was robots going down the wards, okay, to check on the patients, because they didn't want doctors and nurses necessarily doing that because they were doing other things, but also because they were worried about infections and various other things, as we all do. Yeah. So technology might change what was impossible to now be possible, and that might change your decision as to whether you invest in capital goods or not. So all of these are factors that affect the demand for capital goods. They're all there. They can go into your notes. All right. Now, and it's in the slides. You can just grab it and put it right from there. Okay. Now, there is a work task that will be appearing in your classroom. In fact, there's two. Okay. One of which is about costs, which we haven't covered yet. We're not covering until next week, so don't worry about that one. Right. This one is about capital goods and the decisions that we make with regards to the investing in capital goods. Okay, what decisions we're going to make and why we might make them. So the application of that concept. And you can see in an exam, that's the sort of thing that they can ask you. So good practice. So that exercise will be turning up in your classroom for you to work on in the classwork section. So when that turns up, and it should be, if it's not there now, it'll be there very soon. Okay. And you can, what we're going to do, we're going to stop here. Okay. And you can choose to do the work on the worksheet. As said, if it's not there now, it'll be there very soon. Or you can work on that at some other stage tomorrow, right, for example, and have a brain break, have a mental break, right? Always good to have a mental break rather than have a breakdown, okay? Have some lunch, have a bit of a stretch, have a bit of a run around the backyard, see how many times you can go around without feeling dizzy and falling over, right? Just being silly, okay? Now, the idea is that this is an application of the theory, so you can work your way through that. Bit of a task, right? Are there any particular questions with that?
Is there something else I can help with?
No. Sorry, that's Siri. All right. Are there any particular questions that you have with regards to what it is I'm wanting you to do?
Wait, what do you want us to do?
Well, what's going to appear in your classroom? Now, what I'm going to do is I will turn this off and then I'll do the share. Hold on a second. Right, so then I'll go to share and I'll show you what it is. Yep. Now I've got to find it again because that one. No, that's IB. This happens because I have like 20 different things open all at once. Okay, I'll need to find it again. Give me 2 seconds. Now, it's a doc. It will be appearing in your classroom very, very soon. No, not that one. In there now. Okay, hold on a sec. I'll stop sharing just so I can find it a bit quicker. Use the classroom doc. This is it here. Look for home learning. That was the word on the street. Home learning. Right, so we're sharing now, and the document looks like this. It is entitled Home Learning Impact on Business Decisions Regarding Investing in Capital Goods. Right, so what happens if decision home learning impact on business decisions regarding investing in capital goods? Right, so what happens if? What decisions regarding resources might be made if the price of capital goods increases, the price of labour increases, profit levels are high, corporate taxes are cut, consumer income rises, and so on. So the idea is that you're going to then put an answer into all of those. Okay, so that will be appearing. Does that make sense now? Any questions on that? No? Okay. Well, if you have got a question, you can either stay at the end and ask, or